Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar on diversity in the legal profession. My name is Jennifer Matthews. I am the Director of ADR for Alaris. I just have a couple of housekeeping items before we get to the webinar today. We have an upcoming CLE for all of you to save the date. It's July 25th. Attorney Kathleen McDonald will be presenting. She's an attorney at Wilson and Associates in Little Rock, and her topic is ethics and social media. Basically, it's going to cover, if you don't think you or your practice are particularly techy, you still have to be familiar with the world of social media profiles, smartphones, and storage. We are ethically required to be confident in the law and its practice. So go ahead and check out the Alaris ADR website for more information and details on that. CLE, we will be obtaining credit for Arkansas and Missouri for that one. After this webinar, you will receive a survey. We are always looking for ways to improve. Thereafter, you will receive a certificate of attendance. And this CLE has been approved for 1.8 credit hours in Missouri. For those of you who are joining us by phone only, please send an email to marketing@alaris.us. That's how we know that you are with us. If you join by computer, you should be good to go. And the PowerPoint that they will be following today was sent in a reminder email that you received earlier today. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find a link to download the presentation. And lastly, if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A link. Joel will leave time at the end for questions at the end of his presentation. So Joel Stern, I'm going to introduce you, Joel. He is the CEO of the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. I'm just going to do a couple of fun points about Joel because his formal bio is so long. He'll be here for a while. He's obviously very accomplished. I had the pleasure of first meeting Joel about a year and a half ago, and I just wanted to share a few tips that I learned about. Joel loves to play competitive tennis, and he's truly a sports fanatic. He will probably tell you during his presentation he's not very good at math, which many of us lawyers are not, which is one of the reasons he ended up pursuing a career in the law. So I guess we're grateful for that. And Joel clearly loves his family. His dog. I tried to think of some words to describe you, Joel, and I came up with that you are authentic, you are endearing, and you are a natural leader. Now that's more than 3 words. But I believe that his presentation will challenge you to think in a different way. So Joel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Alaris. It's great to be able to partner with such an amazing organization. By the way, is women-owned. We've loved our relationship with you the last few years, and you really do exemplify the quality and the value that everybody expects when they're using minority and or women-owned enterprises. It is great to be here in St. Louis. I should start off by, first of all, congratulating you for your St. Louis Blues. Even though I am from Chicago, I rooted for your hockey team. Unfortunately, I cannot root for your baseball team, so I apologize in advance for that, but what a great hockey season that you had. I love doing this presentation. I've done it for many corporations and law firms over the last few years. And the reason I love it is because I have the good fortune of being able to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on my passion, which is now diversity and inclusion in our legal profession. And one of the questions that I always get asked when I do this presentation is, why you? Why are you doing this? Why aren't you practicing law like you did for 35 years? And I tell people there's really 2 reasons. First of all, when my wife and I got married back in 1987, we said before we had 3 daughters that we would have 3 daughters. And we did. And I do love my family. They are really everything to me. So most of what I do is based on what I think is in their best interest or what they'll be proud of. But we wanted our daughters to be able to be treated equitably in the business field, whatever they decided to choose, and be paid fairly and have every opportunity to compete. And if they go off on maternity leave, they come back and stay on the ladder they were at. And at that time, I was very focused on women diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. And then my first lawyer job, I was focusing on women. I remember we had 1 African-American male attorney in my in-house legal group. And all we did is talk about how we had 1 African-American in my legal group. We were so proud of it. You know, it was tokenism before I really appreciated tokenism. We didn't question, how do we keep him happy? How do we give him every opportunity to move up the ladder? We didn't question, how do we get more minorities to be part of the legal group and grow and have the opportunity to be general counsel sometime at the company or do some great things somewhere else. And my thinking went from women to then include minorities. And then over time, the LGBTQ community has been a passion and focus of mine. So I really am in it for two reasons. First, to help my daughters achieve what they want to achieve. And I'm happy to say that I have a pediatric physician, a pastry chef turned actuary, and a management professional at Walgreens. They're all doing well, but now my passion is to make sure that we in the legal profession are doing the things that we need to do. Another reason I'm so active about this, and for those of you who heard me speak before, this next slide is a new slide. The last few years, when I speak to law firms and corporations, I've heard the phrase diversity fatigue. What is that? Well, we're tired of talking about it. We're tired of trying to make it work. We're tired of trying to acquire and retain women and minority talent. I said, okay, so you're tired. So work harder, be more innovative, put more prioritization and persistence around it. But you don't give up. You know, Jennifer mentioned I am a competitive tennis player, and I am. And when I'm losing and tired, I don't quit and say, sorry, I'm done. My partner would kill me, right? Usually mixed doubles, so I'm never going to put myself in that position. But I'm not a marathon runner. I understand that marathon runners often get fatigued in mile 19. They don't stop running. They figure out how to get the energy and the power to finish the race. And when I hear law firms and corporations saying, it's not working, I'm tired of it, my people are tired of it, let's give up, we cannot allow that to happen. And one of my mantras is basically, it's time to stop admiring the problem we have in the legal profession. And it's a time to start solving. And whether you believe that we have to find new things and be more innovative, or be more persistent and prioritize, or my answer is a little bit of both, we have got to make this a priority. We have got to make this a strategic imperative. The legal profession is dead last with respect to all other professions, with respect to hiring and retaining of minority and women attorneys. And that's shameful. And I'll shame me first and foremost because I became a lawyer to be a leader and to effectuate positive change in our profession. And for many years, I was not part of the solution. And I used to vote the right way, at least on my own mind, write the right checks, say the right things, but I wasn't becoming the change we want to see, which is one of the reasons I feel so fortunate I took this job 5 years ago, because I get to become the change. And while I appreciate not everybody here listening is going to go into the diversity and inclusion profession full time, like I've had the honor to be part of. But I would ask you, and it's a goal of mine from today's presentation, that you think about this a little bit differently, and that you do something tomorrow that you didn't do today. So hopefully you're going to learn some things. I'll emphasize some takeaways for you. We're going to first talk about some statistics in our profession. I always tell the story years ago when I started this presentation, I didn't use statistics. I never really had to sell the reason why we're here. But a very smart general counsel at Showtime told me, you know, if you put the numbers in and have some wordy slides, you get accredited. It's a brilliant idea because this presentation is more attractive to people to get that CLE accreditation. We'll talk about unconscious bias, which I personally believe is the number one impediment we have in our profession. And I'll share with you my self-deprecating journey in understanding unconscious bias. We'll talk about diversity, inclusion, best practices in legal departments. And I appreciate a large portion of this audience is law firms. And that's great, because I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you figure out what's important to corporations, what they're focusing on, then you can figure out how to get in the door of these corporations that you've been looking to get into, that you haven't been successful. Many corporations are extremely excited about diversity inclusion, not only with respect to big firm diversity, giving minority and women-owned law firms the opportunity to compete, and giving tier 2 suppliers that same opportunity to compete. So number one, if you learn what's important to in-house, you can use that as you brand yourself and respond to RFPs. And number two, most of what we talk about with legal practices are relevant for you. I think I'm in a unique position to talk about best practices because way back when I was at Accenture in 2003, we created a legal diversity and inclusion program that is to this day considered best in class and something I'm very proud of. I also get the unique perspective to see what corporations are doing across the United States, and I love sharing that knowledge with both in-house legal groups and law firms. I would be remiss if I didn't spend 15 minutes or so on the National Association of Minority Women-Owned Law Firms. That's what I do for a living. It's extremely relevant to not only in-house legal groups, but great firms that are on this phone today. And then, as Jennifer said, I'll take questions at the end. So some numbers. If you look at the most recent NAW report, you will see from some of these analytics on the slide that women aren't where they need to be. And as Jennifer alluded to, much to my chagrin, math is clearly not my strength. But it doesn't take a math genius to figure out that if I graduated in 1984 and women were approximately 50% of the graduating class, then one would think that women should be paid the same as men, they should be at the same percentages as men, and they should be 50% in general counsels. And if you see from this slide, women aren't being paid what they should be when you try to compare apples to apples. They're not in the percentages they should be with respect to equity partners. They come in at that 50% level, but they're leaving for a myriad of different reasons, and we have to figure out why. And if you look at big law firms, women aren't in the top positions anywhere near the percentages they should be. That is a problem. That is something we have to solve. If you look at, if you look at the NELP report, you'll see numbers that are even more concerning. You'll see that African American associates are at lower levels than they were in 2008. You'll see that the percentage of equity partners that are African Americans and minorities is way below what exists in the population and what exists when these folks are coming into practice. And you will see that general counsels in the minority community is less as well. And this next slide is new for those of you who have heard this before. I decided to peel back the onion a little bit more and try to figure out where are we making strides, where are we going backwards? And this slide is so important because when you peel that onion back, you start to observe something that may not be obvious, is that when you look at progress that women and minorities have made in our profession, most of that has been made with respect to Asian Americans and Hispanic Americans. If you're an African American female in our profession or an African American male, you have a unique set of challenges and your numbers are below what they are for other ethnicity and race and gender. And we need to figure that out. Also, when you look at cities, Boston, Milwaukee have unique sets of challenges, and Miami or Los Angeles or Chicago. You need to both look at the city and the unique set of challenges we have in those cities, and you have to look at minorities, not at a minority level, but within the minority. What are the unique set of challenges that each ethnicity has in being treated equitably in our legal profession? And if you look at the LGBT community, the numbers are really low, and I'm sure they are underreported for a lot of reasons. In some cities, still a significant discomfort with coming out as openly LGBTQ. That's a unique set of challenges as well. So what does that mean for us? We are a minority, we are going to be a majority minority nation in 2044. And our legal profession is all about serving constituents that are heterogeneous. If we cannot figure out how to be more heterogeneous and more blended, and figure out that diversity isn't enough, that's the numbers, but inclusion is what we should be aspiring to be, how we embrace those numbers, we're not going to be able to do our job as well as we should be. We're not going to be in demand from clients that have a choice of finding law firms or suppliers that are doing a good job with respect to minority and women issues versus not doing a good job. This is the time to move. In addition, we have to look at diversity inclusion as a constant and not a wave. And what I mean by that is if you look at diversity inclusion numbers from 1990s till today, you will see that the numbers spike during good economic times and recede during bad economic times. And I used to blame law firms, right? Because I used to buy outside legal services for most of my career. But the reality is the blame needs to be shared among all of us. Prior to 2007, the economic downturn, we challenged law firms to do more in this space. And they did. They created diversity inclusion legal committees. They did more formal mentoring. They put more job flexibility in the workforce that benefited all, but had a specific emphasis on minorities and women. And then the economy tanks. And we as the buyer of legal services told law firms, all we care about is the hourly cost. And the law firms listened. If we put our foot on the pedal, we took it off. And they got rid of a lot of the programs because they cost a lot. And paradoxically, they got rid of a lot of the lawyers that were taking advantage of these programs. For the most part, were minorities and women, and you saw the numbers retreat. And again, the problem is, and this is really a takeaway, we have to look at this issue like we look at any other strategic imperative. Whether it's where do we want to be 5 years from now? How big do we want to get? Where do we want to expand? How do we cut costs if we're in-house legal group? You've got to have diversity and inclusion on that same list, whatever priorities that you have at a law firm or in-house counsel, or this will not work. And we will basically do what Albert Einstein said, make the same mistakes over and over again and expect a different result. And we'll get the same. I love the slide, and I'll let you read it. You don't have to read all of it because I'll talk. But this is one of those slides, again, that gets the CLE accreditors very happy. The reason I love this slide is because it really flows with how my thinking on this subject has evolved over the years. Back in the 1980s, in the 90s, when I had 3 daughters, and when I became a lawyer, having me figure out that diversity and inclusion is the right thing to do as a professional in the legal profession was all I needed to make the most out of it, try to change the world. Unfortunately, not everybody agreed with me. And in the early 2000s, people said, geez, we need to sell diversity inclusion to law firms and in-house counsel, showing dollars, showing that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. So pundits came out and showed the analytics of diversity inclusion, that it was the smart thing to do. And then you had people coming out and arguing with those analytics and metrics and saying, well, that's not true, and you didn't do this, and again, math, so I stay out of that a little bit. It hurt to some extent the argument of it's the right thing to do. And what I love about this slide, because as I tell people, the older I get, the less binary I become, which is interesting. But like most things in life, it's not one or the other, and it's the title of this presentation. Diversity inclusion is the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. And I would challenge anybody that if you cannot be sold on the professional obligations we have to do more, there are a lot of smart business reasons to get all in on diversity and inclusion. So a couple years ago, I just did some Google research, and I found these few metrics that talk about diversity and inclusion. I'll put my own spin on it. I'm not going to read all these, they're in your materials. But what these metrics seem to indicate, my satisfaction and many others, is that corporations that have figured out that diversity and inclusion needs to be a strategic imperative and are taking both effort and results to be better than they were the day before. They have higher shareholder profits. They come to decisions better. They have higher engagement. They have less unmanaged attrition. And one of my favorite things, they come to more innovative, in other words, better decisions that are delivered to the customer. addition, there was a study I found that the law firms that have figured this out. By the way, when I say figure out, nobody is an A. You can't point to any A's out there. Figure out means they're doing the right things and they're making progress and they consider it critical what their mission and vision is. Law firms that have figured it out are making more money, more profit partners than law firms that aren't. And if I can't sell law firms on it's the right thing to do, it surely can be sold as the smart thing to do. Let me tell you a little story about engagement. Back in the early 2000s, when I was at Accenture, we had a legal group of around 900 people. We started measuring engagement. And I ran the Americas Legal Group, and I was also the CLE of the legal group globally. And we measured engagement, and all of a sudden, scores started to shoot up. As I'm trying to tell people, I was absolutely convinced they love their leader, they love the center, they love their pay, they love their work. I hope some of that was true, but the reality is when you peel that onion back, one of the critical reasons their engagement went up was because they loved what we were doing with respect to diversity and inclusion, and they bought into it. And engagement is so important because if you say the right thing, and you strive to do it, and you plan on staying for 3 or more years, you will be more productive. If you're more productive, you will get better results. And by the way, as a law firm management or in-house counsel management, when you have higher engagement, you're spending less time replacing talent you don't want to lose, and you're having an easier time acquiring talent that you want to bring on board. But just a very personal example of why diverse inclusion is the smart thing to do. You will have higher engagement, you will get better results. When you look at diverse inclusion being the right thing to do, and I'm going to go quickly through these slides, but many states have an obligation on us as professionals not to discriminate in the practice of law. I point out specifically California and New York. New York has a brand new diversity requirement along with Illinois, which I'm very proud of because, again, it allows this presentation to be accredited for the diversity requirement. So for anybody in Illinois that wants to apply for that 1-hour diversity credit, this has already been accredited for that. You can go out and seek that and let me know if you have any questions. And then California has an obligation on lawyers to eliminate bias in our profession. And that's a really nice segue into unconscious bias. And again, I will share with you some of the mishaps that I've had with unconscious bias. So hopefully you'll learn something from that and avoid the mistakes that I made. So I start off with a story. I used to give a presentation when I was at Accenture to some of the biggest law firms in the world to talk about how important diversity and inclusion was to us. And I tell people, first I tell people there was one law firm that I spoke to in Chicago, and they had a partner meeting, and we were talking about diversity and inclusion. And I get up there at 2 p.m. to talk about D&I after they're talking about profits for partner and strategic imperatives and everything else. And I get up there, and half the audience leaves, and half the audience stayed. And when I looked at the audience that stayed, they were all 35 and under, and minorities and women. And everybody that left was people that looked like me. And that's an audience that has to hear this message, by the way. And I talked to the chairman of the firm afterwards, and I said, you have a problem. And he worked with me for the next couple of months, and he made this an imperative. And next year, I did the same presentation, a few new slides, and not one person left. And at the time, nobody was even looking at the BlackBerry, which sounded to me because I think I was looking at my BlackBerry while I was speaking. But I also tell the story that when I used to sell diversity and inclusion when I was in house counsel, too often, I made a major aha. I would look at my audience and I made an assessment immediately. Conscious bias. I looked at 25% of the group and I said that no matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter how many times I put my foot in my mouth, which I do, that they will buy into this and they will do some really great things because they believe in it and nobody can take that away from them. And maybe they're looking for some new things to do, but they are all in. Then I looked at 50% of the audience and I made an observation that this is the group on the fence. They want to do the right thing, but are not sure how. If I do a good job, they're going to buy into it. If I don't galvanize them, maybe they'll walk away doing the same thing as they did before. And I ignored them. And then I looked at 20, 25% of the audience
And I made an assessment that these people are not buying a word that I'm saying, that have no interest in this subject, that no matter what I say or do, they're not going to change their mind. And being the competitive person I am, what did I do? I spent most of that presentation trying to convince that 20 to 25% change the way that they think without any likelihood of success. And by the way, for years, I think I failed. I don't like to admit that. But I failed because I didn't understand unconscious bias. And I didn't recognize the group that I should have focused on was that middle group that really wants to do great things. It doesn't know they're not doing the right thing because their brain is sending messages they're not aware it's sending. And once I learned how to sell diverse inclusion to the law firm audience, I think in-house counsel as well, and let people know that unconscious bias is a huge impediment for a profession, I think I got much better at what I was doing. And by the way, please, please, please understand that while this next part focuses on unconscious bias, there is still conscious bias out there. And it exists in our profession like it does in all other professions. But my view is for those that have conscious biases against women or minorities or minority women or LGBTQ or whatever, if they grew up that way and they're still acting that way at their age, probably not the audience for the biblical change, even though I hope law firm management, in-house counsel management gets rid of them. I'm going to focus on the group that you have a chance to change the world in which you live in. And that's what unconscious bias is about. And the paradox there is that you would think that we as lawyers would have less unconscious biases. We know who we are. We're self-aware. We're professionals. We have higher education. We're type A thinkers. And the irony is really goes against everything because we're so self-aware and because we're confident in our knowledge and our education and as professionals, we're probably less likely to admit that we have unconscious biases. So really, first takeaway is if you haven't taken the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, please do. I took it 4 or 5 years ago, not to discover my unconscious biases, but to confirm I had no biases. And I didn't like my results. And I was really about to write a letter to Harvard saying, geez, your school's going downhill in standing. You can't even create a test that appropriately measures that I have no biases. I didn't do that, obviously. I was just mad. And I took it a year later and I got the same result. It's 6 months after that. And this time I divvied the system and tried to answer the question the way that I thought they wanted me to answer. So I would have 0 biases. And I still had the same exact biases in the same exact area. And it took me 2.5 years to come to the realization that I have unconscious biases. And once I came to that conclusion, I came to another conclusion that we all have unconscious biases. So please take that test. It's the first step. But I'm not suggesting you have biases in all the different categories there are: ethnicity, race, religion, LGBTQ, but you will have biases somewhere. And it's such an epitome to understand where your biases are so you can start to take steps to mitigate. And another personal opinion, I don't think you ever eliminate biases. I group it as alcoholics or drug addiction. Again, this is my opinion. But I think once you understand that you have them, you can take steps to minimize them and be a lot better at what you're trying to do, and also really start to solve the unconscious bias issues.
So really fast, can you pause?
Sure.
Can you tell the group?
So this slide kind of shows some of the biases that exist. And again, I will share with you 2 of the biases that I suffered from that I had no idea I suffered from. Number 1, I suffered from the halo effect. And I tell this story because my team never told me this story, but I used to be the final interview and arbiter of all the lawyers that came to work at Accenture and the Americas Legal Group. And when they came in with a sports connection, whether it was my son played football at the University of Michigan or my daughter played lacrosse in Rhode Island, I ended up spending the next 45 minutes talking about sports and not about them and not about whether they'll be happy here and whether we'll be happy with them and what are the attributes that they bring to the table that are going to make them extremely happy and engaged and do great things. No, we talked about who's going to win the Rose Bowl next year Or can you explain to me the game of lacrosse? Because I didn't grow up with lacrosse. And what happened is every time I had that sports connection with the people I was interviewing, I would go back to the hiring manager in the legal group and say, this person's fantastic. They're going to be great. They're going to do wonderful things. And my team notified me years later after we're talking about unconscious bias. They said, you know, Joel, you do realize anytime you interviewed somebody with a sports connection, you thought they were perfect. And if they didn't have a sports connection, there was a good chance that you may not connect with them and suggest that they be hired. And I tell you, that hit me so hard. And you talk about easy changes to that. Once I knew I had that bias that I didn't know I had, you know, now whenever I'm meeting somebody, whether it's a formal interview or other, I make sure that a very small percentage of that time is talked about the things that we are both interested in the sports realm. And we're talking about other things that are absolutely critical and probably more important. And that was one that I suffered from for years. And I have to apologize to a lot of candidates that may not have gone forward because I didn't recognize that I wasn't really interviewing them the way I should have been. The other one that I talk about is the fundamental attribution bias, which is we're going backwards, guys. One more. Which is one that, again, is a paradox because it really affected men more than women. When I would interview people and I would see a break in their resume and their service, if it was a woman, I presumed the best and greatest things. And by the way, it's no secret that I have a severe bias for women in our profession. But I assumed that they had a baby. I assumed that they were tending for a sick aunt. I assumed that they were on a sabbatical. I assumed that they were doing something other than the practice of law. But never once in my mind was I aware that I was never assuming that they could have been fired, that they couldn't hold a job, that something else happened. But when a man came in and they had that same break in service, when did you get out of prison? Why can't you keep a job? What's wrong with you? And there was a lot of men that had breaks in service that I didn't get the opportunity to figure out whether they were going to be a great choice and whether they would be very happy working at our company. And by understanding that bias, that I treated women in a positive way and treated men in a negative way, I'm so able, again, to take steps to mitigate that. So those are a couple things that affect me. A little bit more. Unconscious bias affects everything we do. It affects who we like, who we don't like, who we mentor, who we pick for plum assignments. It affects big firms, who we like with big firms, who are we asking for to do the work. We know, study by study shows that a minority or a woman or a minority woman who writes a brief and shares it with her majority partner, a white male partner, is graded more harshly and more mistakes are found in that paper than that of the white male associate. 10 years ago, my presumption was we have way too many curmudgeons and bigots in our profession. And we do have a share of them in our profession. But the real issue is it's not bad people doing bad things because of their racism for the most part. It's good people that are not doing the right thing because they're not aware of what their brain is telling them. I tell the story, my brother, before he passed away, was a very famous concert violinist. And I learned a lot about orchestras and quartets and soloing. But in the orchestra, if you're third chair violin, you want to be second chair. And then you want to be concertmaster, which is first chair violin. And you audition, you play. And the conductor or whoever listens to the music, watches you, and they make a decision. Were you better than the person that was the chair ahead of you? And then you move up, or you stay, or you move down. And they did a study where the assessor of your performance didn't get to see you, but just listened to the music. And when that happened, women were 4 times more likely to win that audition than when you saw the woman versus the male playing. And again, years ago, it's why can't we allow women that are performing great to win that audition? They deserve it. Now I realize that somehow in the back of the mind of people, they were presuming that the man plays oboe better or violin better. This is the impact of unconscious bias. This is the construct of the voice, which is really an interesting study in how we think. It also has a huge impact in the supplier diversity realm. And I'll give you a couple stories. Number one, there was a few years ago, one of our largest minority-owned law firms in the United States dissolved. And there were more than 200 lawyers owned by minorities, majority-owned. And they dissolved for a lot of different reasons that were privy to them. But my understanding, they were business reasons. The culture got bigger, they didn't acclimate, more infighting, a lot of things. Businesses dissolve every day, law firms dissolve every day. But this was a minority-owned law firm that dissolved. The very next day, I got hounded by the press and by in-house legal groups and by others, basically saying to me, is this the demise of the minority-owned law firm? And I took offense to that. And I said, why can't a minority-owned law firm dissolve? Because they dissolve like all other businesses. And why is it when a majority-owned law firm dissolves, nobody questions the ability of majority-owned law firms to survive? And it was interesting timing because the week before, a majority-owned white male Jewish-run law firm in Washington, D.C. dissolved, Dickstein and Shapiro. And nobody questioned whether this is the end of the white male Jewish-owned law firm. Why are minority-owned law firms held to a different standard? Why do we presume that if one closes, they all close, or that they're failures? But we do that, and I think a big reason we do that is unconscious bias. The other one impacting supplier diversity is I will have somebody tell me, well, I would love to use a woman or a minority-owned law firm, but we had a bad experience with one of those in San Diego, California. And I said, what is one of those, first of all? But I said to that same person, have you ever had a bad experience with Baker or DLA or Kirkland or name your favorite, Clifford Chance, name your big firm of choice. Oh, all the time, yeah. I go, what happened? Did you stop doing business with them? Oh no, we give them a second chance and we took action to correct it. Did you ever think about stopping to do business with other big law firms because that law firm didn't service you well? No, never. So why do you hold minority and women-owned law firms to a higher standard? Why can't you just hold them to the same standard? Do you have biases that you're not aware of that suggest that one bad experience suggests that none of these other law firms can do the amazing work that they typically do? And again, I think unconscious bias plays a role there. So what do you do? One, take the Harvard implicit bias test. And I had somebody question me a couple months ago at my old company, Accenture, and said, well, I've read studies that this test doesn't correlate and the analytics, blah, blah. And I said, look, take it and see if you learn something from taking it, and I will bet you do, because many have. And I challenge everybody to do it. If you're in a law firm or a business partner or in-house counsel, have your group take it and have a third party who never shares the individual results, aggregate those scores and find out where your biases are as a group and spend time talking about it. It's an incredible exercise. As I tell people, it was easy to go to my best friends and say, here's my biases, and they, oh no, Joel, you're perfect, you're great, and here's what I'm gonna do to minimize it. No, you don't need to minimize it. Versus talking to my critics, and I've had a few, and saying, here's my biases, here's what I'm gonna do, let me know how I'm doing. What an amazing exercise, and I'm very proud of myself for growing at the age of, back then, age of 50, now 60. But it's critically important for self-development to understand where your biases are. You will become better as a result of it. Consult experts. For years, I touted Vernee Myers. She's now head of diversity inclusion at Netflix. She's going to be on our keynote speaker in our annual meeting in Los Angeles. She's amazing. And by the way, for those of you in Missouri or elsewhere, she did a TED Talk on Ferguson, Missouri, which I just thought was outstanding and galvanizing, just so well thought out. So Vernee Myers is excellent. But Vernee Myers is now in-house and doing a lot less of what she was doing before. Michelle Silverthorne's absolutely incredible. African-American female, young, dynamic, speaks to law firms across the United States, speaks to in-house. She was a speaker at our New Orleans meeting, got a 5-minute standing ovation. She is an incredible resource. And then I will end unconscious bias with my story about Vernee Myers. Vernee Myers, for those of you who know, is an African-American female. And the reason I emphasize that is because it could happen to any of us, but because of her status, her gender, and her ethnicity, I think this story is even more compelling. She's also an unconscious bias expert, bar none, one of the best I've ever seen. She gets on an airplane, She walks through past the cockpit. She sees an African-American female captain, and she sees an Asian-American co-pilot female. And she is excited like she's never been excited before and thinking, wow, this is a great airline. The world's changing. I'm feeling really good. Maybe we're making a difference. She gets in the back of the plane. She sits down. She gets her books out. She's drinking scotch or vodka, enjoying the flight. It encounters severe turbulence. And her first comment is, where the heck is the white man in the cockpit? And I find that so compelling because this is a woman, you can believe I have biases. But to say that a woman, an African-American woman, whose subject matter expertise is unconscious bias, who knows more about this subject than anybody I've ever spoken to, had to acknowledge that she had biases she had no idea she had on that airplane, suggests in and of itself, this would be guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we all have biases and we don't know what they are for the most part. So that's my end on unconscious bias. So the next part of this presentation is going to be on in-house best practices. And I know a large percentage of the audience is law firms. And again, I'm going to share with you why there's 2 reasons that you should pay a lot of attention to the subject. Number 1, a lot of what is covered here is relevant for you in the law firm practice, even though this slide was designed for in-house counsel. But number 2, if you understand the message that I am proselytizing across the United States and in-house legal groups are parroting and focused on, let's go back to diversity inclusion. Is it the right thing to do or the smart thing to do? It is the smart thing to do. If you understand where you as a law firm and a business developer and a marketer can go into your clients and propose that they either use minority and women-owned law firms or amazing tier 2 suppliers, Alaris being one of them, you're going to have a better chance to be interviewed for the job and to win the business. I am absolutely convinced of that. I am more and more getting large law firms, either at the request of in-house counsel or on their own, asking how can NAMWOLF help us get into clients? Because it's important. Because no matter how much we try to do diversity and inclusion and the strides that we're making, we have more to go, and you are a way to help us get into the client. So this stuff is important to you, and it's important for in-house legal groups. And the part that's important to all of us is the part on the left-hand side. I would argue, nicely, that if you're not willing to do the things on the left-hand side, your program is going to fail. I've seen it time in and time out with law firms and in-house legal groups. If you're not willing to dedicate the time and the effort and the resources into a diversity inclusion program that's paramount to what you're trying to accomplish otherwise, you will fail. And by the way, I think you're better not to do this if you're not going to do it with the gusto and the passion and the authenticity that you need, because when you do it and you don't do it all in, your people know it and they resent it even more because they had hopes and you let them down. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So the things on the left-hand side, number 1, everybody talks about top-down, having the general counsel or the managing partner of the law firm say this is important to us. And that is really important. It is very difficult to make strides when you don't have the top person at your firm or in-house legal group supportive of diversity and inclusion. But even if you have the top person supportive and a zealous advocate, I will tell you from experience and observation, the law firms and the corporations that do better are ones that have not only that top-down support, but the bottoms-up and the middle area support. Most of the programs from law firms and corporations that I've seen take off to another level is that 7 to 10-year lawyer that excites the entire group to action, to solve rather than admire, and basically gets the entire group walking to the same drumbeat. You have to have accountability defined. If you don't have a mission and a vision statement, and you don't define what you're trying to accomplish and what the goals that you have, and you don't have metrics associated with that, you're not going to be successful. And by the way, I would suggest to you, and I'm very Pavlovian, that you have a carrots and sticks approach. At Accenture, every single person in the legal group in the Americas whether you were a managing lawyer, a younger lawyer, or an executive assistant or contract manager, they had a diversity inclusion element to their performance. And if they didn't do what we expected them to do, that affected their performance review, and it affected the dollars they made or the bonus or merit increase they got. That's a way to send the right message to your law firm or to your in-house legal group. Again, you see here, managed as a strategic imperative. I love when I go to PICO, which is an energy company in Philadelphia, and I go to meet with the general counsel on the 7th floor where they're at. They have their core values, and diversity inclusion is one of the 4, and it's not the last one. And I love telling the story because it's a major mistake we make. The general counsel meets with his deputy GCs 6 times a year for formal meetings. Diversity inclusion is always on the agenda, and it's not item number 15, it's item number 3 or 2 or 4, and it's always discussed. And then those DGCs leave the room and they tell their entire legal group, here's what we discussed, this is important, here's what we're gonna do. You're sending the right message. You should also share your successes broadly, go after awards. And first you go after the awards because you want to feel good and you want to win, again, me. But then you realize that winning these awards galvanizes you to do more. It sets the bar higher and you try to jump over that higher bar. And you do have to discuss your failures with a little smaller of an audience, because the reality is if you don't have any failures, you're not being innovative. So you shouldn't succeed in everything you're doing here. You should try some things and you hope the great majority of them are successful, but you learn from the mistakes that you make. And then legal leads and that follows. And this one's probably more appropriate for in-house counsel legal groups, but it is so much fun when an in-house corporate legal group can be a leader in the space rather than a follower, and get IT and HR and finance and all the other non-revenue producing groups to follow suit and do what they were doing. It's incredible how that is perceived by the outside world. So now we move to the right side, and these are the elements, the 4 pillars of what an in-house legal group should be focusing on. And again, most of this is relevant to law firms. Let's take these one by one. Internal focused. What do we look like? What are our metrics? How many minorities do we have on our legal team? How many women do we have on our legal team? But more importantly, what's happening to the minorities and the women and the minority women in year 3, in year 5, in year 7, in year 9? Both law firms and in-house legal groups love to brag about their hiring. What very few brag about is where those people are 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the line. And again, going back to numbers, what you're seeing is minorities and women are coming in at decent numbers and they're leaving at much greater numbers. The white male is staying on average 10x what a minority or a woman or minority woman is staying. We have to figure that out. We have to have a formal mentoring program. We have to discuss inclusion, which is the embracing of the metrics that you have. Diversity without inclusion does not solve. We have to have a diversity inclusion legal committee. And what I tell law firms all the time when I have the privilege of speaking with them or meeting with them, I would like to meet with your diversity inclusion legal committee. A couple of them say, what's that? Well, that's a problem. Most of them say, sure, love you to. And you go in there and you see a group of 20 people, and they're all under 35 minorities or women. And a view that wasn't politically correct 15 years ago is now considered politically correct, and I've been saying it for years, is you need to have the white male part of the discussion and part of the solution, because many will think that that's the group that's held people back for many years. So when you go to a law firm and you see a diversity inclusion legal committee that's made up of an inclusive group of people at all levels, at all ages, of different ethnicities and race and gender and sexual orientation, your group is going to be more likely to solve rather than admiring these amazing challenges we have in our profession. The next area is a big law firm focus. And from the in-house counsel perspective, and I know law firms don't love to hear it, but we are the buyer of legal services. We have the ability to make decisions based on lots of different factors. In-house counsel is increasingly making one of those factors diversity inclusion. Law firms need to understand that, and law firms need to sell with that. In-house counsel, if you're HP, you're doing a 10% holdback with every law firm you utilize, and they only get that if they meet or exceed the diversity inclusion metrics that Kim Rivera at HP has set. Microsoft has a bonus program. They give bonuses to law firms that are doing what they want to see with respect to metrics. And very interesting, they have bonus program for the in-house lawyers that's hiring outside counsel to make sure that they're hiring outside counsel and getting the rich diversity that they want from both minority and women-owned law firms and big firm diversity. Walmart, years ago, switched out over 300 client relationship partners that were white male with minorities or women. Now, when I was at Accenture, I did appreciate that we had a few good white male client relationship partners that I wanted to continue in that role. But what I did in those cases is I said, please bring a minority and or woman as your successor so she can learn the tricks of the trade and either take your place or be well-versed to be a client relationship partner somewhere else. Amazing thing to think about. In-house counsel, sign ABA Resolution 113. Law firms tell them to sign ABA Resolution 113. Law firms get active with the Mansfield Rule. In-house counsel loves it. And for those of you who don't know, the Mansfield Rule is an affirmation that law firms make when they say that 30% of all the promotional opportunities, we will interview women and or minorities. In-house signs up to that and they basically say, if you do that a year later, we will meet with them whether they got those positions or not. So we can develop relationships with them and give them an opportunity to do business. Mansfield Rule version 2, in-house counsel basically signs up to it and says, we will give promotional opportunities and make sure a percentage of those interviewed are minority and women. Version number 3, I hope next year, these same in-house legal groups say, we will give minority and women-owned law firms opportunity to compete for the business while we give other firms that same opportunity. But great progress has been made with the Mansfield Rule. That's an example of something that's very, very innovative. Big firms partner with minority and women-owned law firms. Almost every law firm I ever talked to, I asked the question, in the next 6 months, will you need another law firm to help, whether it's conflict, whether it's local needs, whether it's bandwidth, whether it's practice area, whether it's independent counsel in a white-collar defense matter? How many of you law firms are seeing if there's a minority and or women-owned law firm that can help you deliver outstanding quality and service? How many law firms are not aware that when they come to a client and say, we have to farm this work out for the following reasons, but we reached out to NAMWOLF to help us find some minority women-owned law firms? How many of them realize the client, for the most part, is going to love that and see that as a positive? Those same law firms and same in-house counsel need to be talking to second-tier suppliers that are minority or women-owned and use them to help market the amazing quality that you're going to get when you do business with us. So the same amount of time you spend looking at minority and women-owned law firms, big law, you should be looking at minority and women-owned suppliers because that's part of the equation and a very important part. Pipeline diversity is the third area. I could speak on and on about it because it is my favorite area. The problem with pipeline diversity is we're looking at it the wrong way. We're focusing our attention on lawyers or law students, which we should continue that focus. But the real answer, the real panacea, is getting to third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh graders and giving them excitement about the legal profession and telling them that you might be interested in a legal career. It's going to high schools and focusing on minorities and women and getting them excited about the practice of law and showing them the great opportunities that exist out there. It's going to law schools and getting minority communities at law school excited about being a patent prosecutor and working for you in the law firm. So many opportunities with pipeline. The problem that I have with the pipeline stuff that I'm doing is I want instantaneous gratification. And I want that third grader to tomorrow be a lawyer and proud to be a lawyer and enhancing the community and helping to solve the problems that we have. That's not going to happen for a while, but you've got to plant those seeds. If you don't plant those seeds, we will be in that tautology where we make the effort, but we're not solving. I absolutely love pipeline diversity. The last area is supplier diversity. And this is really an important area for the law firms and in-house counsel that are on this call. If you think about the genesis of supplier diversity in the business realm, supplier diversity came about because there was an acknowledgement that women and minorities were not being treated equitably in whatever profession they were in. Many of them had the courage and the entrepreneurial gumption to start their own businesses, not to survive, but to thrive and kick some you-know-what. But they were historically, economically disadvantaged because we didn't let them in the door in Fortune 500 corporations. And throughout several years, most corporations have extremely highly touted supplier diversity initiatives, which are all about giving minority and women-owned enterprises that opportunity to get in the door. Not to win the business. You let them in the door, they're pretty convinced they're going to wow you. So let's look at supplier diversity in the legal realm. We said before that the legal profession were dead last with respect to the hiring and retaining of minorities and women. But when you ask corporations whether they extend their supplier diversity initiative to legal firms, to legal services, whether law firms or suppliers, many of them say no. Many of them haven't thought about it. I can't tell you the number of times I will meet with the general counsel and they'll say, our focus on diversity and inclusion is hiring more women and minorities at Big Law. And I go, yes, please do. Please make sure they're doing the right type of work. They're not just doing the rudimentary work. Please make sure that the firm you're using has women and minorities in equity positions and on the compensation committee and that are being treated equitably in terms of pay. But that's a piece of the solution in the legal area. Another critical piece is extending that company supplier diversity program to legal services and giving these amazing minority and women providers that started their own business that opportunity to compete. And that's what NAMWOLF is all about. NAMWOLF is a nonprofit trade association started in 2001 that has a focus on diversity and inclusion in the legal profession, but a razor-like focus on supplier diversity. And we believe that corporations and law firms need to tap into our network, as more and more corporations and law firms are doing, to help actually solve the challenges we have in our profession. Our mission is to provide excellent quality and value in the legal profession to corporations and to other law firms. And I always tell this story. I've never met a NAMWOLF firm that said, give me the business corporation or a law firm out there in St. Louis because I'm Hispanic American, or because I'm women owned, or because I'm openly LGBTQ. What they do say, and I think it's very fair, they say, would you let me in the door as part of your RFP process, whether I'm a supplier that's women owned or a law firm, and give me the opportunity to wow you with the amazing quality and value that I can deliver. And when you utilize me, you're not only getting the services you demand and expect, but you're supporting diversity and inclusion in our profession. That's what NAMWOLF is all about. That's what women and minority-owned suppliers are about. Yeah. We're wrong slide. There. Excuse me while I get the slides right. Okay, so something about NAMWOLF. So to get into NAMWOLF for law firms that are listening in and for in-house counsel, it's a very onerous process. The law firms dislike it because it's so onerous. But most of the lawyers that are part of NAMWOLF came from Big Law and again did extremely well. They have the same pedigrees. We're in 43 states. We have almost 200 law firms. When I first got involved with NAMWOLF at Accenture and brought them in, there were probably 10 law firms and 5 corporations. Now we have 199 law firms and hundreds of Fortune 500 corporations and public entities that are excited, and more law firms that are excited about partnering with us. They have expertise in most practice areas. You know, one of the myths that I have to debunk with corporate America is that, well, I'll use a woman-owned law firm for a simple EEOC matter in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, great, but you should be using them to do outsourcing deals for M&A, For white collar defense, we have several lawyers that practice in the DOJ and attorney generals in the SEC. You should be using them for trials. Our lawyers are not only expert in litigation, but they know how to go to trial and win. And NAMWOLF aligns perfectly with the corporation supplier diversity initiatives, which again message to big firms when you're using NAMWOLF or other minority women-owned law firms, you're able to sell that and get into a client easier by selling that. Trust me on that one. This slide shows the criteria for getting into NAMWOLF. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I want to focus on two things. Every one of our firms has been truly certified as women or minority or LGBTQ owned by 3 extremely reputable certification agencies, WeBank for women, NMSDC for minorities, and the NGLCC for LGBTQ firms. But the one that I want to focus on is the quality indicia. Every firm that gets into NAMWOLF has been credentialed by at least 3 Fortune 500 corporations that say, I use this firm, I had a great experience with this firm, and I recommend my brethren at AT&T use this firm. And that's an amazing vote of confidence from the buyer of legal services to other buyers that these are the types of firms that can hit it out of the park for you. We are in 43 states. Heavy saturation in New York and Florida and California and Illinois, some great firms in Southern Illinois and in Missouri, some great business partners in St. Louis that we have. Again, this map was probably a third full when I first got excited about NAMWOLF. When I took this position, it was probably half full. So we've made some really good progress in getting firms in different cities and states and firms with some unique practice areas. Next slide. This is a takeaway slide for all of you, including law firms. We are here to make it extremely easy for you to find minority and/or women-owned law firms that can deliver. And there's lots of ways. The first one I call the baby boomer way. On our website, and I think in the materials that you should have, we have our corporate counsel guide. It's updated quarterly. It lists firms by states, and then you turn the page, it lists firms by practice area. You can marry them up the way I like to find things, but I still use maps and cars. And you can pick the firms that you're interested in interviewing and using. And again, big law can take advantage of that as well. Use our website, which is open to anybody and everybody. Do a member firm search. It's not perfect. I'll be transparent on that one, but it's gone from a D- to probably a C+, B-. Until we figure out how to define practice area and sub-practice areas, it's not going to be perfect, and we're still working on that. But it's a great way to get a feel. You know, I'm interested in transactional lawyers that do technology, that can do cloud computing. You'll find firms that can do that. The third area is ask in-house counsel for recommendations. While I have to be agnostic for all of our firms publicly, in-house counsel, which I used to be, can tell you use this law firm versus this law firm, or I think you're going to like this law firm better. Or in the rare occasion, maybe you don't want to use this law firm. And it's a great resource. We have a great network of in-house counsel. And then finally, I want to talk about the anonymous solicitation process. We started this a few years ago, and we've done over 400 of them, and they've led to hundreds of interviews and more than 100 engagements. Big law or in-house counsel can write me a note or use our website search function and say, Joel, you've intrigued me. I'm interested in seeing what your ability to handle local counsel needs in this area in the following cities. You could allow us to use your name. But if you don't want to be harangued by a bunch of law firms calling you up and saying, we can do the work, we can do the work, we can do the work, you can be anonymous. We can describe you. And we can reach out to our law firms, either by state, practice area, or the whole network, and we ask them to fill out some answers to the questions you want raised. We aggregate that data electronically, and we package it up and send it to you. And you'd be surprised how many times big law will say to me, can we use this? I say, sure. Anything you want to do that puts you in contact with these amazing firms, we are happy to do. And by the way, our suppliers are now listed on our network and our website, which is great. And we can help you find, if you said, I need help with depots, and I'd love to use a woman or minority-owned business. Well, one, I don't have to give you any more names than the name Alaris, but we can give you the names of other entities that are part of NAMWOLF and helping us change the world in which we live in. This slide depicts 12 or 10 practice areas that we have. These are lawyers across firms that have expertise in these areas. Each one of them has directories on our website. You can look at that. You can really drill down and see the lawyers that have certain capabilities in certain areas. It's a lot of fun to be part of these PACs. We call them practice area committees, not political action committees. But they've evolved over the last few years and are doing some great things. They also love to give free CLEs out. I'm not going to speak a lot about these two programs because I appreciate that the majority, or at least half the audience, is law firm audience. But we have two programs that create a foundation for in-house counsel to do more in the supplier diversity space. The first one is the NAMWOLF Partner Program. That's where corporations have an aspirational commitment to give 5% or more of their outside counsel budget to minority and women-owned law firms. And for big law, I will state this comment. My goal is to have NAMWOLF be an anachronism, to not have to focus on this. I don't think that's going to happen. But that happens if in-house counsel is giving 5 to 10% of outside counsel business to minority and women-owned law firms. That means, again, bad at math, 90 to 95% of the business is still going to big law. So I urge you to understand we are complementary to you to help solve a problem. We are not in conflict with you. And I think that's a critical thing that we need to state. But this is a great program. The next slide depicts companies that have allowed us to state that they are in the program and attain the goals. And you'll see there's some pretty amazing companies out there. The next program that we have is called the Inclusion Initiative. This is where 35 companies each year tell us what their individual goal is to spend with minority and women-owned law firms. We aggregate those goals and we tell the world what these 35 companies are going to do. 2018, we're going to give $270 million of business to minority and women-owned law firms. A year later, we poll those same companies and we ask them to tell us what their actual commitment was. We aggregate those numbers and we tell the world they made a goal of 270, they hit 300. Over $1 billion of business has been delivered to minority and women-owned law firms. And this next slide just gives you a list of the companies that are part of this. And there's some amazing companies, including our friends Macy's. I have the good fortune to speak to them tomorrow. They've been fantastic. But you'll see Merck and Microsoft. You'll see Walgreens. Our three most recent joiners are Walgreens, Honda, and CenterPoint Energy. Different industries, different interests, complex legal needs, and they're giving a boatload of business to minority and women-owned law firms. That's the message for you. We have an advisory council that's made up of in-house counsel that actually drives our strategy. You'll see here the chairs. They come from Wells Fargo, State Farm, Toyota, and Metro Mobile. I used to head up the advisory council when I was in-house counsel. It's a great group. You'll see the companies that are represented on that slide. It's an amazing group of people. It's one of the reasons that I took this job is I loved the in-house counsel that are active and passionate about what we're trying to do. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide because we have 2 meetings a year. The only group that cannot come are non-NAMWOLF law firms, but it's a great way for in-house counsel to fall in love with the organization, meet these almost 200 law firms, have great CLEs, have great keynote speakers. Last year, our GC panel was composed of United Airlines, Walmart, Allstate, and I'm thinking the other one, United, I forgot, but three, Allstate, Walmart, United Airlines. Why am I not thinking of the fourth one? But 3 amazing corporations, one more. This year we're having State Farm, Honda, Toyota, Aerospace, and one more that we're still working on. So just great opportunity to meet our law firms. So the last slide, and I said I would save 15 minutes for questions, and hopefully we'll get some, is this is the slide that really changed the way that I look at the world, how I look at the subject, why I took this position, why I spend a lot of time giving this presentation and praying that folks listening do something different tomorrow that they would have done today. I used to have Mahatma Gandhi's picture there, but people told me that's not his quote. I still think it is his, but if you don't believe it's his, it's mine. But I won't take credit for it. But, you know, it's not enough to say the right things and to do the right things. You actually have to live and breathe the change that you want to occur. And just imagine if we all did that, if everybody listening in today actually became the change they wanted to see in the world. It would happen. Thank you very much, Alaris, for having me, and thank you for listening in.
Thank you so much, Joel. If anyone listening has any questions, you can post them at the bottom on the Q&A section. I don't see any right now, Joel, just so you know, but we'll give them just a minute. I do want to say thank you for your patience for our audio issue. That was obviously not your fault. We just had to fix something on our end.
My fault.
So our apologies, and thanks for your patience online for those of you. Joel, I do have a question, and I don't know, not to put you on the spot too much, but just listening to you speak, I couldn't help but think about, you've been there, I think 5 years, you said. Is that right? You know, a 3 to 5 year plan, not necessarily for NAMWOLF, but maybe your involvement with NAMWOLF. I think ideally, maybe you wouldn't even need NAMWOLF, right? I mean, that just crossed my mind. Maybe it wouldn't need to exist if things worked out as planned. But I'm curious what the long-term plans are for you with NAMWOLF, if you can answer that.
So my personal plans with NAMWOLF, well, I gave the NAMWOLF board 2 years of my intention to retire. I have a personal story about that one. I love this job. I always tell people, when they asked me if I wanted to do this, I said no 3 times. And then my 3 daughters said, Joel, you have to take it. And they said, the reason you have to take it is every time you talk about what you're doing today, you talk about retirement and dream about retirement. Every time you talk about NAMWOLF, your eyes light up and you get all excited. And as a result, you need to take this job. And like most things, they're right. I'm so proud of them. So I took this job and tried to help enhance the brand of NAMWOLF. But my view is, reading about CEOs and heads of law firms, you need rotation. And I will have been in this job 6.5 years when I retire. I wanted to give them notice. I wanted to help with the transition. And I wanted new blood to come in and take it to the next level. So at the end of November of next year, we will have our new CEO announced. I will transition them. And then I will spend more time proselytizing diversity inclusion in any way I want. So I will not be sitting down. I will go back to executive coaching. I absolutely love that, with a focus on minorities and women. And I will spend more time with my one existing grandchild, which is a son. But I've been told my 3 daughters are going to have 2 each. So I'm hoping in a few years I have 6 grandchildren. But I've had a great run. I love this profession. I love this subject. NAMWOLF'S asked me if I'll continue talking about it. I said, sure, I would love to. Now, my dream for diversity inclusion in our profession is that we don't see the numbers go back every time the economy tanks. There will be a recession. There has to be sometime. And when that happens, if we see law firms and in-house counsel lose the vigor and the enthusiasm and passion they have for some of the great things they're doing today, we have failed miserably. And that's why I spent a lot of time giving this presentation. We cannot allow that to happen. And that's my primary goal. That will continue to exist way after I'm no longer in this position. Thank you.
I don't see any questions online. I guess that means you were perfect. So that's good.
Or they're sleeping. I am easy to reach. It's joel_stern@namwolf.org. The other document, there's documents that I think they have as attachments. One of them is an article called The Power of Partnering. I always tell the story, but I forgot to, because you never say the same thing exactly every time you do this presentation. It tells you how to do partnerships between big law and minority women-owned law firms the right way. When I did them at Accenture, they failed miserably for a lot of different reasons I'm not proud of, but we did them wrong. This tells you how to do them the right way. There's another document called Strategic Sourcing Document, which was created by JP Morgan Chase and NGLCC, FDIC, Buying Legal Counsel, and NAMWOLF, that talks about how to create a program in-house to enhance the utilization of minority women-owned law firms and minority and women-owned suppliers. Thank you, Jennifer.
So Joel, there is a question.
I gotta go.
Really fast. The materials that Joel is referencing, you can find on our website to download. It's on alaris.us/Alaris-webinar-618, where most of you found your original materials. Here's the question.
Sure.
There is a lot of focus on minority and women-owned businesses. While that work should continue, should we create opportunities for women and minorities in associate roles to create their own book of business?
Oh, wow. Thank you. When I did executive coaching, this is what I spent my time on. We have got, when I did executive coaching, the primary group I focused on was the non-equity partner that had to get an equity partner, but had to get a book of business and do all these things that they had to, but we're never trained to do that. And it adversely impacted minorities and women even more than the white male. So I loved teaching people how to develop relationships, teaching people how to sell, telling them what in-house counsel is looking for when they're buying. We need, again, I am NAMWOLF, but you saw only 20% of this session was on NAMWOLF. But we have to focus on the group of amazing minorities and women that are at big law that are not being treated equitably, that are not given the chances. You know, I heard an African-American female in Milwaukee 2 weeks ago say, why is it when the white male makes a mistake on his brief, he's forgiven and told not to make the same mistake again, but when the African-American female makes the same mistake, she's considered a failure? This is a real problem we have. We should be mentoring people. And people that are seeking mentors should seek not only people that look and act and think like them, but people like me. You want inclusion in the mentoring you get, so you get lots of different perspectives. Law firms should have programs established to help associates and non-equity partners get to the next level. Corporations love to mentor law firm lawyers, and you should take advantage of that. The other thing, and I didn't get to, but law firms need to enhance the pipeline. You know, when you go to Harvard and Yale and St. Louis University and whatever universities you look at to find your lawyers, and you're all competing for that same talent, including that minority and women talent, I would challenge every law firm out there to take a visit to a historically Black college law school, including Howard, but other than Howard, because the other schools are really good, and meet with the top X% of that class. You will be wowed by them, not only of what they have accomplished and how smart they are and how great they will be at your law firm, but you will see that these folks, for the most part, climb mountains that I've never even seen and clearly not tried to climb. They have had challenges in their life that go beyond anything that most of us had to deal with, and they've met those challenges, and they're doing great. Law firms need to expand their capabilities. In-house counsel, going back to helping younger attorneys be successful, you know, we have the client relationship partner concept. You know what we don't have? The law firm relationship concept. Every in-house counsel, and if you're a law firm, I challenge you to go to in-house counsel and say, you know, how you have somebody in our offices to talk to about whether you're happy or not happy with the services and what we need to do to get our business? Every law firm should be going to the clients and saying, can we have a law firm relationship partner where we can hear what we're doing right and wrong, where we can figure out how we can give you more access to more talent with an emphasis on minorities and women. There are so many things we need to do. And go back to that slide with the 4 pillars. You guys should all be writing down things you want to do in each of those pillars. And the internal focus one kind of goes to that question. Law firms should devise programs to make sure minorities and women are going to thrive 5, 7, 10 years down the line. That's what's not being done. So yeah, it's a great question, a huge area to focus on.
I don't see any more questions. So do you have any last thoughts? Any final thoughts, Joel?
No, I mean, you can find me anytime. Again, I would challenge you, and please let me know, are you going to do something differently tomorrow than you did today? If you did that, I'm happy. Then you met my expectations. If you go back and do the same thing over and over again, or do nothing, or allow diversity fatigue to settle in, then I failed, and I don't like to fail. Thanks, Jennifer.
Well, thank you. It was very, very enlightening and always entertaining. So thank you so much. And this will conclude the webinar.